Alrighty, hello friends. Welcome to the super exciting last session on this Tuesday evening. I'm super excited to be welcoming you all, especially Jen, who I've had the pleasure of working with since I've joined Cortex the last couple of years. But we have an awesome lineup of ladies here. So we have Jen, who will be moderating this panel. We have Sarah, we have Ebbi, Saras, we have Ebbi, Haley, and Claire. And today's session is Women in Startups, Leading with Vision and Grit. But let me introduce our moderator, Jen. So Jen is an experienced leader and public speaker currently serving as an operations manager at CIC. She is a pioneering she is passionate about creating collaborative environments that foster connections and build authentic and engaging communities. A lifelong advocate for the rights of women and underrepresented communities, Jen combines her expertise in leadership with a deep commitment to support diverse voices in the entrepreneurial space. So please help me in welcoming this amazing group.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. Super appreciate it and appreciate the opportunity to get these amazing people together in the vein of supporting underrepresented communities, especially in the startup world. Women in startups leading with vision and grit. Really, this was just my own desire to get these amazing women I have known for a long time together and talk and hang out, because we don't get to do that much at work, shockingly. We have another panelist, Monique, who's just running a little bit late, as I'm sure we all know, happens sometimes. So we will welcome her warmly as soon as she gets here. But since y'all have been so kind to join us, I figured we'd just go ahead and start. So again, my name is Jen. I'll be hanging out with you guys for a little while, and the 5 women next to me, or 4 right now, are all founders or executive directors of their own startups, in addition to being wonderful human beings. So we're gonna have some fun today, we're gonna have some great conversations, and there will be about 10 minutes at the end to do Q&A, and I would love to hear whatever this brings up for anybody. I'd love to hear what y'all have to say, because you're gonna be part of this too. So we did a little bit of an intro, but we can go ahead and start here with Saras Chung. Saras is the executive director and founder of Skip Design. And after I officially introduce everybody, I'll have them talk a little bit about what their organization does as well. And next, Ebbi Young. Ebbi is a digital strategist and trainer. She's also the founder of ET Digital Consulting. Haley Shoaf comes to us as the co-executive director of Unlocked Labs. And Claire is the founder or principal, Claire Shell, of Claire Shell Consulting. So thank you all for joining me. And Monique, when she arrives, Monique is the founder and COO of Levy Consulting Company. I'm talking too fast, I'm gonna take a beat. Thank you all for joining us, I super appreciate it. Saras, do you mind if we jump in with you with the first question? Could you give us a brief introduction to your organization and share what inspired you to take the leap and start it?
Sure, hi everyone. My name's Saras Chung. And if I lead with what I would normally say, you'd have no clue what I do, and that's what my kids would tell me too, is like, what is that? Usually I would say, I'm a system dynamicist, and what does that mean? I do research on systems, and that's basically what Skip Design does. We are systems researchers. We have been working with the school systems here in St. Louis for a long period of time, and I would say I'm an accidental startup leader. I didn't mean to actually start anything. I don't know if that was ever my intention. And when they ask you in kindergarten what you want to be, like I never would have said I want to start my own thing. But I actually started it in kind of response to what I saw was a gap between what's happening in the ivory tower in research. I was at WashU as a computational social scientist. And then noticed that what's actually happening on the ground in our schools and around the community was so disconnected that the two weren't talking to each other. And so that's basically what Skip does. We try to provide bridges between the real science that's happening both in the classroom and with the teachers who are doing those types of studies too, like in practice, to people who are in research who might have more access to analytical tools, to kind of have them talk together and work together to do better for students.
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, tough act to follow. No. I'm taking note of everything you said so that I can go ahead and look all of that up. But yes, so hello everyone, I'm Ebbi Young, dual founder actually of ET Digital Consulting and Fluffy Girl Movement. So 2 very different things. Much like Sarah's, I literally was just filling a gap So that first one, Fluffy Girl Movement, actually started in college at Mizzou about 15 years ago now, just as an answer to creating community for plus and curvy women, and there really being a space where we can be elevated in our experiences. So that's how it started. And then ET Digital came to be because Fluffy Girl is mostly events based, but then we had something called a pandemic and nobody was going to an event. And I had to ask myself, well, I'm not a one-trick pony. I've done a lot of influencer work and content creation, journalism background. What are the other gaps that we're seeing here? And what I saw with a lot of small businesses is that since they had to close their doors, it's like the business was stopping and slowing down. But we have something called the World Wide Web. It just made all the sense in the world to leverage it. And so what we do at ET Digital is we help your teams understand the power of storytelling and really integrate that to stand out online, capture those audiences, and convert them into buying customers. So ET Digital Consulting and Fluffy Girl Movement, hand in hand.
Yeah, and my name is Haley Shoaf. I'm one of the co-founders and co-executive director of an organization called Unlocked Labs. And Unlocked Labs does two things essentially. We design and build open source technology to improve the justice system in a variety of ways. And also, 70% of our team is current or formerly incarcerated. So we run a training and employment program where we help folks that have a lot of lived experience and proximity to the justice system be empowered to contribute to building those tools. My background, so I, many lifetimes ago, used to run a prison education program. Before I lived in St. Louis, I lived in Washington, D.C., and did that work, and just really was captivated by it. And then I moved to St. Louis in 2015 to work for an organization called LaunchCode, and for many years was involved in kind of standing up and running technology training programs and workforce development. And it was actually through that work that I got connected to my now co-founders, who at the time were currently incarcerated and had taught themselves how to code without the internet, which is a wild thing, and had all these ideas about and things that they had designed and built in the context that they were in, and et cetera. And so I really just got started helping them, and then over time realized that there's a lot you could do here, and there's a really interesting intersection of folks that have huge proximity to these issues, but oftentimes are the last ones consulted in terms of how you solve them. And so, yeah, it kind of similar, I think, to other folks, took on a life of its own. We officially founded the organization in 2021, and then it's kind of taken off from there.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Claire Schell. It's good to be with you today. So I founded my company, Claire Schell Consulting. Every time I have to say it, I shudder a little bit. But I founded it in May 2023. It turned a year and a half yesterday. Yay! And I am a facilitator, a consultant, a coach, and actually it's interesting, even when I walked in and I saw the sort of founder panel, what you said, Saras, really resonated with me, because that label of being a startup founder, being an entrepreneur, actually is not one that I immediately identify with, maybe yet. Those other identities definitely come first for me. I have done organizational development and DEI work inside of institutions for a long time. And for me, deciding to start my own company grew out of a few things. One, kind of coming out of COVID, honestly, on a personal level, realizing that I wanted my life to have a different kind of pace. I wanted my days to feel different. I wanted to have my accountabilities from a sort of social justice change agent to be with and to other people. And I also, wrapped up in that, I'm a mom, I have 2 little kids, and so I wanted to just be more present for my kids at the end of the days, in the mornings, on the weekends. And so I would say the third piece for me was feeling like I could have a lot more reach doing the kind of work that I do, which is often tied up in asking leaders to take a really hard look at themselves. And so I do a lot of truth telling. Turns out that's sometimes easier to do when you're outside of the organization than when you're tethered to or within it. And so I felt like my impact could really look and feel different for me and the people I work with if I did it from the outside looking in. So that's how I ended up here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monique Levy. I am the founder and chief operating officer of Levy Consulting Co. We are an executive operations consulting agency, affectionately known as a fractional COO. So I typically go into for-profit and nonprofit businesses and serve as your background person. My accountant refers to me as a hitman occasionally. I have been called a problem fixer, a fire putter outer. If it's happening in the background and you don't require me front and center, that's where I thrive. That's where my team thrives. We build processes, procedures, we get things up and running, we take things apart, we onboard, we offboard, anything in the people space of operations, that's where we thrive. In a past life, I was a family law attorney, so I have a really lovely skill set of getting people who don't agree to at least come to a general consensus, whether they want to or not. I can usually find money where it's hidden, and from people like to hide it, and typically also just help people think, as much as we hate this term, outside the box, but a lot of our leaders and founders don't have a second person. They don't have a right hand, and so we're able to be that person who's there for you and be vulnerable as leaders, because your team expects you to have it together. They expect you to have all the answers. Everybody in this room knows that's not possible, but it's really hard as a leader to get in front of your team and say, you know, I don't know what we're gonna do. I don't know how to make this work. It's nice to have someone you can be authentic with, and that's kind of where we sit.
So Monique is Olivia Pope. Got it.
Yes. I do. I love all the nicknames. Olivia Pope has been one of them before. I don't wear enough white to be Olivia, but maybe.
I mean, maybe when your daughter's a little older, you know, like I feel like white has been out of my life for several years now and probably will be for a while, you know. Thank you so much. Honestly, I've known these ladies for a bit and I'm still learning things about them and their businesses, so I appreciate it. I feel like a common thread in here has been that there were areas that you saw needs and then kind of stepped forward to fill them, which I feel like women in general are very good at problem solving, figuring out these things. But of course, leading with vision and grit is also not just about the successes, right? It's also about the trials and the tribulations. What has been your biggest obstacle in building your organization and how did you overcome it? Or if you're still working on it, what's going on there?
I'm holding the mic, so I'll jump in.
Go for it.
So for me, and I wonder if Claire feels this the same way, I'm a service provider at the end of the day. And what's great about all these communities and startups and accelerators and funders is they're really looking for great ideas and people who typically aren't in the space. What they're usually not looking for are service providers, people who are providing a service to help your business thrive. So I can apply for the grants, I can show up at the spaces, but at the end of the day, they're like, oh, you're just a consultant. Or they're like, oh, it's not fun and sexy what I do. I can't, like Bank of America, and be like, yes, we sponsored a fractional COO to tear apart a team. That's like, my work doesn't write headlines. But my work pushes companies forward and we get stuff done. Like we are the consultants that are in the weeds and we do the work. I won't just hand you a report. In fact, I'd rather not hand you the report and just do the work. But it's hard as a service provider. Like no one funds this, so I'm self-funded. I get a client, we reinvest. I get another client, reinvest. I do this work day in and day out. I take on the debt, I take on the liabilities because no one's funding service providers.
And to piggyback off of that, absolutely, there we go. Service provider as well. So I'm going to add another element to that, articulating the value so that people can see that a lot of times we are the connection piece between you and what you want to see. A lot of times it's really difficult for people to understand. Like I specialize in storytelling. I'm training your people literally how to tell the story. But they say, oh, you do marketing. It is 18 jobs in marketing, y'all. Just in case anybody didn't know that. A copywriter is not the same as SEO, is not the same as a strategist, is not the same. These are all different things. Although you want to pay them for all to be one thing, it's not. And so to articulate that value, even with me being in the media landscape of things, in the marketing landscape of things, when I'm saying these things online, it's like, oh my goodness, I think I need you. Actually, no, I just need to learn how to use Canva. And it's like, do you know what you're putting on Canva? Do you even know what the message is on Canva? So you're right. When you're talking about working with smaller, so when I say I work with small businesses, we're talking, 6 figures of revenue and over, right? So small businesses can be up to like $1 million in revenue, y'all, FYI. But it is less sexy because we don't have an actual product. So I've seen people say, oh, you have merch? And I'm like, wait a minute, what? You would buy the t-shirt that says tell the story, but you don't want to necessarily, or you don't understand how to tell the story. So I'll say that's been one of my biggest challenges as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I will jump in because both of those points deeply resonate as a fellow service provider. And I think related, although I don't think either of you quite said it in this way, like cutting through some of the noise. And for me, that was actually a bit of a barrier. I had this idea of going out on my own for years. And part of what stood in my way was some fear and, leaving a sense of stability. And also this idea that there are so many consultants out there. There are so many service providers. I know a number of folks who do similar work that I do, and I think the world of them. I've worked with them. I know a number of folks who do similar work who have zero quality control and do not do great work in the world. There are just a lot of people who provide similar services, and so I do think there is a way in which we do have to make that crystal clear case and also over-rely on our networks and on the relationships that we have. I've never been one to get excited about networking events or schmoozing or being salesy. It feels bad and not me. And so really staying true to who do I know who actually can vouch for the uniqueness that I bring to this space of organizational culture change. Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that you have to look for someone to advocate for you. I think as women, that's another thing. It's is my voice enough? And do you need to hear it from someone else louder? And why is it more validation there than for me to say it?
Or writing that line and speaking up for yourself, but not being viewed as too aggressive or too full of yourself, when it's really just I know the quality of my work, and clearly y'all are proving it.
Yeah, I guess I could add to that. A lot of our work has been in historically marginalized communities. In populations where maybe things have been tried over and over and over again, and this is schools, right? Schools in St. Louis. And so I think the biggest challenge for us has been to not pretend like we know the answer and say, I have the solution for you. That is the anti-thing that people want to hear. And that's been a challenge because we actually don't know the solution. And the point was for us, at least at Skip, to partner with folks to start listening and providing an avenue for folks who do have very lived experience of the system to kind of share what's happening with decision makers who are affecting their everyday lives. So for us, walking into a space where there have been decades and decades and decades of different things that have already happened to a community, and us saying well, we're gonna help you now. That has been probably the hardest thing, and the way that we're trying to continue, being in this space, being available in this space is just, first of all, showing up. Someone told me once 99% of the work is just showing up, being there, being a face that people can see. And then the other piece is just really leaning on this concept that we call radical listening, and that's the idea that you're not listening so you can rebuttal. You're not listening so you can say, oh, they said that word, so now I can talk about X. It's listening because you don't know the answer and you want to be changed by it. So a lot of the initial projects we started had nothing to do with systems stuff. Even though I was hungry and chomping at the bit to do systems work, it was can you just get us in a room so we can start talking to each other? And building that trust in the initial, I feel very lucky to have had that space to do that, but I think that in and of itself, especially as a startup, especially as someone who doesn't look like whatever community you're going into, that's huge.
Yeah, I can build on that as well, because we're sort of in the business of systems change work, which is long and messy and complicated and convoluted, and there's not, one single grant that is going to fix the problem. And when people ask what we do, one of the examples I give them is several years ago, I was helping run a program that did technology training for folks that were incarcerated. And we had a student that was going up for parole. And so we wanted to help him prepare for his parole hearing. And so we went to the case manager at the prison and we said, hey, can we get a record of all the programs and services that this guy has received while he was inside? And it took the case manager 42 minutes to try to pull up the record. At one point, he had to pull a casebook out of his desk because he was operating an AS400 system, and he had to look up the key codes to get into the green screen, from war games. And then when they and then when they did finally pull up the record, it was wrong. And then he was like, also because of like certain rules and regulations, the person that you're helping actually isn't even allowed to see this record. Yeah. And then we went, and this is not the first time that I had done this, but we went to be advocates at the parole hearing, and he came in with a stack of like 100 pieces of paper that were like all the paper certificates of things that he had done while he was incarcerated. And the parole board had none of that information. They had a list of every conduct violation he had committed over 20 years and nothing else. And we were like, you know, I'm a technologist by training, and you can look at and kind of talk through those things. And I was like, okay, there's certain things that actually literally will solve this problem, like data and record keeping and like software and tools, and you can build those things, and we have. Like that's one of the core tools and products that we've built and we work on is tools to make it easier for people to make the case to get out of the system. But also that's maybe 30% of the work. The other 70% is culture change and getting the people that are responsible for making decisions for spending money on those types of things on board with that work, and all of the different stakeholders, you know, the state IT department talking to the Department of Corrections, talking to the state legislature, and like realizing that I've become like a marriage counselor for state government, which I didn't think was like what my job was going to be. So it's really interesting. Like I think that a lot of things that are really worth solving are inherently messy, and it's like you have to kind of figure out how to be really creative to get the bandwidth and the runway to be able to work on some of those big, tricky problems.
Yeah, thank you so much. I feel like it's also, you know, as we've touched on, we are women in these areas, you know, moving forward in some of these things. Has there been anything specifically in your field as a woman founder that are either challenges or advantages while you're working through these difficult situations with your organizations?
You said advantages?
Maybe. I wanted to be positive. I wanted to leave it open. I think, you know, we talk a lot about the disadvantages, but have there been any advantages? And if the answer is no, we already know that, so.
One of my biggest advantages has been the fact that I used to be out a lot, right? So I met a lot of different people. And I want to say at the time it was not strategic, which is why I'm not out as much, because now it's strategic. But now when I go out, I'm still able to connect and see, like I know about 10 of y'all in here, and I'm like, oh, I kind of met them 5 years ago at a random wine and cheese thing, right? I go to a lot of those, or I used to, but yes. And so the leverage there, and I used to work for Venture Cafe, so if I look familiar, there we go, we have that as well. So being able to leverage network and really be able to reconnect with people now at a different point as I'm on this side of the journey with entrepreneurship has been a real key. And being so bold as to ask people, like I am the ultimate slide in the DMer, because it does go down in the DM. Do not be afraid to slide. But I'm the ultimate, like, hey, let's connect. And then before I'm done, I'm like, who else should I be speaking to? Okay? And so that has been an advantage, because now I'm able to be introduced to rooms that I may have not been able to just by keeping to myself or to my own selected groups that I'm naturally a part of. Yeah.
That makes total sense.
One of the things that came to mind when you asked that, Jen, was I think, you know, we've all probably seen various research over the years around women like having higher emotional intelligence and some of the things that go along with that. And that is not a slam to any of the male identifying folks in the room. But for me, I think one of the things that it helps me do is, one, when I was inside an institution, think differently about how I show up as a leader, like leading with care and love and joy, and like starting with empathy and curiosity. And so now as I think about being in a very different seat, how I hold that for my own business as a business of one right now, but also how I hold that with and for my clients. And I think what that translates to is very much a feeling of the relationship is the priority, not the transaction. And I just this morning was having a conversation. I was facilitating a workshop, and I was setting up for it. And my point person at this particular client brought a question in the sort of like post-election haze of like, here's what we're thinking about from a communications perspective and how we want to hold space for people. And they literally said like, you can charge us extra for this, like to talk through this. And that is even a consideration for this person that I might actually think to like charge for that 10 or 15 minutes of time. But for me, it's so baked into how I want to hold space for my clients and interact with them, because it is about like how I show up each and every day. It is about them feeling like they can trust me and reach out anytime and get the support they need, so that it's not about a number or a dollar sign, but actually about the feeling of trust in the relationship.
And I think too that relational aspect, you know, because I also don't love networking, and sometimes I'm just tired and I want to go home, even if there is wine and cheese, you know. But looking at it as meeting really amazing people, going for a little bit after work, taking your time, and then making connections, that's what keeps me going to those things. And I think in business too, like, you know, it's all like who you know, and you can take that to a very different place. But I think the looking at it as it's who you know because we know these amazing people. It's who you know because they're doing incredible work, you know, that really matters.
Can I add one quick thing and then I'll hand it off to whoever wants it? You asked about advantages and challenges. And so to segue into one that I think is still real, which is that like, you know, the session is titled Leading with Vision and Grit, and I do a lot of work with my clients around vision, like how to imagine better and different, asking what if a lot. And so I think about that for myself and how to be a business leader and how to be an effective female founder. And we still live in a world that doesn't always prioritize or value those kinds of behaviors that I mentioned. And so for me, it's about the commitment to keep showing up and closing the gap between that vision and the present, because I know, like, I will come across other consultants and service providers who do not engage with their clients in the way that I do, and that's okay. But like how to carve out a space where those things are valued and seen as good, not a detriment.
I can jump in, and I think something I've noticed about being a woman founder in general is a little bit more of a propensity towards longer term thinking, and also I think an antithesis to the idea that, like, especially in the startup world, there's all this pressure to like scale and be the biggest and the best and the most all the time. And I think, I don't know, that's just like not really baked into my DNA. Like, we're solving big problems, we're dealing with things that, like, yes, I can think of 100 people right now that I could and would want to hire tomorrow that like really need jobs that I could work with, and I can, ideally the type of work we're doing should be in all 50 states and like could have an impact in a lot of places. But if we do that like really rapidly and haphazardly, like that doesn't serve anyone, and I would rather serve 15 people really well and 5 states really well and like figure out what we're doing in a way that feels really concrete before kind of moving in the trajectory of like, and then if it makes sense to extrapolate that, that's awesome. And I don't know, I think I've noticed, I've been in this work now in various capacities for like a decade or so, and I've seen a lot of especially social impact organizations that like start, and then there's this a lot of pressure to scale and to be everywhere and to do everything, and then the wheels start falling off and breaking down. And I think like this sort of slow and steady approach to be like, okay, you know, now after 10 years of kind of thinking about these things, we're in a place where we can like really make an impact and have that foundation. I don't know, I think that like generally tends to be more the way women think than men, and it's sort of sometimes viewed as a weakness, but it actually can be an asset if you're playing the long game and if you're dealing with like very complex things.
Gives you the space to continue learning too, which is really important when you're doing something that you and sometimes other people haven't done before, you know?
A challenge that I saw a lot with Fluffy Girl was quite literally the patriarchy itself. Yeah. So when I came to leadership at Mizzou, predominantly white, predominantly male, and pitched the idea of Fluffy Girl movement, it was met with a lot of ignorance as far as not understanding why the stories were even important, why the community was even needed in the first place. And I'm literally having to bare my soul to folks that don't get it, understand it, or even want to understand it. So it was a very gritty process to move around them and leverage community elsewhere to keep us going. Yeah.
To find the spaces that you do want to grow within. Because I mean, if you haven't seen Fluffy Girl Movement, it's incredible. I'm a huge fan. I follow all the pages. And I just think it's super important to be having these conversations because, you know, people oftentimes, especially in social media, are like, I don't want to see that on my feed. But there's lots of us who are like, yes, I absolutely want to see that on my feed. Please give me more of that. You just got to find your people.
Do you want to move on, or do you want to know
I
more
am
of
here
the
for
challenges?
y'all. Whatever, if you got stuff to say, we can go for it.
Yeah, I would just say, like the one thing to add, the superpower of being a woman is it's almost like a Jedi mind trick for me. Think about it as, I think President Obama made this very old psychological concept very like present, but it's that unconscious bias that people have. I kind of use that to my advantage. So I think people, when I walk in a room, they think, oh, you know, she's probably like really nerdy, like maybe the glasses help. I don't know, like smart, knows what she's doing, she's got it together. Like I use those things to my advantage when I walk in a room because I know that there is some sort of stereotype about who I am and what I'm showing up as. And so I've been able to use that as a superpower, I think. The challenge that we haven't touched on maybe that we may need to bring into the room a little bit in startups is just family life and expectations and cultural things and all of that. So I would say that is probably the hardest thing. Startup is a hustle. Startup is like, you know, up late at night. Everything you see on TV is like probably accurate about like startup life. And, you know, having 2 teenagers that were very young when we first started this, you know, we had to make some sacrifices. Someone asked me about like, how do you balance it? I was like, there's no such thing as balance. Something is giving at any given time, and like you just have to make the right gamble that what you're giving to right now is going to pay off in the long run. And that's hard when it doesn't feel like it is. So I think that for me has been the hardest. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we deal a lot, you know, some of us are parents and some of us not yet, or maybe, you know, that's, you know, a lot of women. And it's because it isn't a balance, you know, it's that like, if you've heard that thing that's gone around for years and years about the balls that you drop, you know, like you drop the plastic ones, the ones that will bounce, and like that's not kids, you know, and like they don't let you anyway, they hold on like a monkey, you know, like yes, 100%. They will attach to your leg regardless, so you know, you can't let that go. But what are the things, and sometimes we're just so busy it's really hard to figure out, you know, what I'm even looking at that you can drop, you know, and you have to like intentionally take that time, because I think especially when you're building something new, it feels so important and so big, and you're like, I need to keep pushing and keep going, but you also got to take care of yourself, you know, and I think that's something that all of us, I know I struggle with, I assume a lot of us also struggle with, you know, building in that time without feeling selfish. You know, my son asked me the other day, am I the most important person to you? I said, no, I'm actually the most important person to me. And he said, how dare you? And I said, here's the thing, babe, if I'm not taking care of myself, can I take care of you? And he was like, I'll let it pass, I know. So speaking of balance and also things like, you know, I think it kind of goes hand in hand with imposter syndrome, you know, how do you approach those things when we are maybe not feeling our most confident, or we just took a big hit and we're wondering if we made the right decision to keep, or if we want to keep moving forward with this?
So it's funny, when I first got started, a part of it was because I was just completely burned out. And I was like, if I'm going to work for someone else or this hard, I could probably do the less amount of work for myself and get a better return. So, right, I already know what I'm doing, so I can figure this out. And the imposter syndrome first came in when I'm like, well, I don't know what to do. Like, I would see all these people at presentations, or I'd see other consultants, and I'm like, I don't have any of that stuff. So one woman was like, just come with me to a client meeting. And she was pitching to the zoo. Like, she had a deck that she showed me that she'd put together on Canva, with help though. But it was something that I knew how to do, and they were just regular people. Like, she effectively humanized the whole process for me by just inviting me to one of her pitches. And we've kept in touch for a little bit, but we've lost touch since then, because she's running her own consulting agency. She does strategy consulting. But every so often when I feel like, I'm like, I don't know if I should be doing this, I think of any situation where I've been in a panel, at a presentation, working for someone else, working with another company. I'm like, wait, you make X amount of dollars, like over $1 million a year, you have a 20-person team, and you also run things on paper. Got it. And so I remember that, like, people look to us for our expertise, but none of us have it figured out. We're all technically imposters, or none of us are imposters. Like, there are lots of people who are really good at things, and there are lots of people who are really good at faking it. And sometimes faking it until you make it means you are figuring out. It means you're actively learning and trying. And that's all you have to do. So there are some days where I'm like, I don't want to do this, but I'm like, wait a second. I know for a fact that, like you said, you've worked with people of lesser quality. If you sometimes have to compare yourself to someone to just get yourself through over that hurdle, that's okay. Now, you shouldn't do that all the time because you should be able to, push yourself. But there's just going to be days where you're like, I'm better than that. I'm going to be able to do this. And like, I think it was Michelle Obama, like have the confidence of a mediocre, I'll just say man. Just have the confidence, and I would say it, have the confidence of a mediocre person. We've all been at a party where there is some person who is the loudest and wrong about everything. Parking, what's in the punch, what's not in the punch, the address to the party. You're like, how are you so wrong about very obvious things? Be that person. Channel that person where you're like, I know the sky is blue, but it's gonna be green today. Be that person, because we all can see it, and sometimes you just need that little bit of extra to get through the day. And after a while, you kind of just believe it, and because it is true. So I will say I will be hitting year 3 of my company in April, and the imposter syndrome it kind of goes away, because you're like, I'm good at this. Because you do have to tell yourself that you are the only person who's gonna love what you do more than anybody else. I work with my spouse. I still can't, and he loves what he does because now he works with me. But it's still my company. He can't love it as much as I can. He's never going to, unless he decides to go do something else. So you have to remember that it is yours and you know what you're doing. If not, you wouldn't be there in the first place.
Yeah, I love that you said the point about like none of us are imposters, or we all are, because I think about, this is so interesting. This topic comes up like in every women's leadership development, in every like small group about how women can support women. And I listened to a talk, I think it was earlier this year, America Ferrera talked about imposter syndrome, and she was like, I think of that term as like victim shaming, victim blaming, that we're calling it the wrong thing, because what this really is like an appropriate response to all the things I've been told. That it's not something I'm doing wrong because I feel like I don't belong. And so I think of that often because I do think it's a lot about mindset and really owning the power and the influence that we do have. And for me, the way that I combat it is like authenticity to my core. Like what you see is literally always what you get. At all times, here I am. And I think for me, that also requires that I do what I ask my clients to do, which is to let go of the idea of perfection, because it is not real. It is a made-up concept. And so like reminding myself that I can be excellent, but I won't ever be perfect. And then honestly, back to where I started in the first question you asked about just other consultants and people out there doing the work. There are so many amazing people who I can like gut check with and ask questions about, because for me, when I'm in it with a client, like facilitating a retreat or coaching someone, I feel zero imposter syndrome. It's all about the like proposal and the pricing and the like, that's where I get in my head. And we've literally had those conversations. We are office neighbors. And I've had those conversations with other amazing colleagues and consultants who are doing similar work, because we've got to support each other to remind each other that like we are doing this for a reason.
Yeah, I feel like the sort of cliche advice that I think about a lot and also give to other people is just the idea of like doing it scared and just being like, you're never ready. You just like do it, and then you do it more, and then you do it more, and then at some point you realize that it was easy. And I think like, yeah, I think that is something at some point just kind of internalized. I don't know where I heard it from, and I think it's been really true. And like that there's still to this day, like I don't wake up and feel like I have it all figured out. And there's like something that comes up probably once a month where I'm like, I don't know. And we're like, we're just gonna do it. And like, it's working out, so. And I think it's true of like, it's true of work, it's true of life, it's true of a lot of different things. I like on the side over the last couple of years have started real estate property investing. And I saved up money and I bought a duplex. And like when I went to go sign the paperwork, I was like petrified. Like I couldn't sleep the week before. I was like, I don't know what I thought was going to happen. Like I bought a property in 2021 when interest rates were super low, and renting out the front half of this building was going to cover the whole mortgage. I was still terrified. And then like I 4 years later, just this summer, I did it again. Like I bought a larger building anyway. And again, I was terrified. And like 6 months later, it's working out fine. It's like, I've like learned some things and it's fine. And I think that's like, I just similarly like saw several male peers that had done similar things that just like seemed very unconcerned about things that were just like keeping me up for weeks on end. And at some point I was like, okay, like, you know, I've gotten more confident that like you'll just figure it out.
Yeah. Or you've also probably had those moments, which has happened a couple times for me, where you're saying a thing and in the middle of it you go, man, I really know this. Like when did I'm not making it up, like this is all true things, like man, I know some things, and then you realize, you know, you do, and like you become more confident because you're not just making it up anymore.
So I was working with a client actually last week, and as I was creating like her custom presentation, I'd analyzed all of her data and went through the things, and I came up with the mantra because I asked like this really intense questionnaire before I work with you, because I need to understand the people that I'm working with, because I customize each experience. If I'm going to teach you storytelling and from an authentic space, I need to know you as a human. And so she said she best learns through mantras. And so as I'm sitting up here, I'm a theater kid, by the way, so I can bust out at any given time. I really have to restrain myself up here. Based off of what y'all are saying, the songs coming to my mind where I just want to, anyway.
If you stay after 5.
There we go. We're putting on a show. But I put on there, I had this slide where it literally says, this my ish, nobody knows it better than me. Right? So Gwen Stefani came to my head. This my ish. And so as she saw it, now mind you, she's all the way in California, I'm here in St. Louis, we're on Zoom or whatever. And she was like, what's happening? And I said, no, I need you to repeat this after me, because you know your ish, and nobody knows it better than you. Even the loud and wrong person, they say it so confidently that they probably have 1 million followers just because they're loud and consistent, but wrong. But people are just like, I'm going to cling to this, right? So as we're going through her presentation, this my ish, no one knows it better than me. So I had to answer your question, how do I combat imposter syndrome? I remind myself of that. I may not know everything, but I know this ish really well. And I try to drive home, instead of being motivated, you're not going to be motivated every day. It's not a thing. Discipline. So it's discipline over motivation. Nobody gets up, well, very few people get up and go to the gym because they like it. Very few, and if you're those people, don't you dare. But the rest of us do it because you only get one body, you need to move it, right? And you eventually feel better. That's how I feel about imposter syndrome. Like literally, I've been speaking on stages for 20 years, and I'm an international speaker, all of these good things. But right before 4 o'clock, I was in that corner talking to my blazers, and I'm thinking to myself, what if I start stuttering? And what if you just have to do the thing. And you know, that's what we're doing, so yeah.
And then it's going to be over eventually, so.
Time is great. +1 to all of what you all have said, and I think one thing I keep reminding myself is all of us on this planet have been here for a limited amount of time, right? And even though it seems like other people have figured it out, we're all kind of figuring it out at the same time. And so one fun thing that we do in our office, we're a bunch of like small, tiny, little, petite ladies in the office. There's 3 of us. We'll have a big meeting and we're like power posing. just for fun, because I think there is something like internal and mental about like, no, we can show up. And then I often think, just real quick, the last thing I think about is like, what if we asked for what we thought we deserved rather than what we really deserve? Because, because often when it gets down to the paper, you're writing a contract, this is how much it costs. Like something mentally tells us to like, let's cut this in half. This is too much. This is not enough. But like actually, if we wrote down what we really deserve, I think the work would get done better. Actually, it's like, it's not even about us anymore. It's about whatever you're doing. I think there's more power to it, so.
Yeah, and there is a thing I've seen where people will pay more, like they will not choose the cheapest thing because they think it's cheap. So pricing yourself in a higher echelon, you're telling them what you're worth. And then it's their decision whether they agree or not, and obviously you were all worth it, so, you know. We've got a couple minutes before we can jump into Q&A, so I wanted to do a lightning round if we can do something like that. What is the most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself during this whole process?
It was supposed to be lightning, wasn't it? It was supposed to be lightning.
Claire does not know what to say to this.
Oh, I know this is being recorded. I'm going to try to watch my mouth. But I'm more badass than I actually thought.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, we've known each other for a long time, and yes, I agree.
I will actually say that I've learned there is actually enough time during the day. Yeah, there is.
Where did you find it? You find money. Where did you find time?
So I do ops, so time management is a skill set, but there is enough time in the day, and for me personally, like I don't actually do the weekends or late nights. I do weekends because I want to, so like I put a TV in my office, so I'll go like watch football and catch some emails because it's my quiet space, not because I have to, because I want to.
Sorry about that, Ben. I'm so sorry. Should I repeat that? Or you? No, we're good. Okay. So there's enough time in the day. And that's what I learned. There's enough time in the day for me. And it's just time management. Like the balls we're talking about, I will say my work personally, I'm not saving lives. I don't do emergency work. My clients know I don't do emergency work. I have hours posted. We have a scope. You know how to get to me. If something is truly urgent, all my clients will text me. They only have to text me when they're about to fire someone. And that's it. That's the only time they do, and they know I'll answer, and it's never a problem. But everything can happen within the confines of a working day, whatever you want that day to be, but you will not catch me out here working 40-plus hour weeks. It's about 35 to 40.
I also sometimes tell my team, like, the not being an emergency is sometimes a gift we can give to people, because unless there's water coming from the ceiling or someone's having a heart attack, knock on wood, like, very few things in our fields are actually emergencies.
Yeah,
Haley, you may think differently.
Yeah, well,
There sometimes are actual emergencies. Yes.
To build on your point, though, Monique, I think for me, my reaction, I need to work on my face. I didn't realize it was that intense. I think for me, it is a realization, because I do a lot of like very emotionally heavy, draining work, like holding space for people to talk about tough topics and when they feel like they belong and they don't, and asking leaders to interrogate their whiteness, and like doing some stuff. And what I have realized, and has surprised me in a really wonderful way, is that I can do that deep kind of care work and still have space left for myself and my kids and my family and my friends, like at the end of the day. And that was not true for me for a long time, and so that's been a gift.
I think, and I don't know exactly how to phrase this, but I've learned a lot, especially recently, about like what it means to show up as a leader, and also that like just inherently, if you are leading things, then you are a leader, and like to sort of start to conceptualize yourself that way. I think I started this work, I was like helping some friends, and then helping them do more things, and then helping them do things as a full-time job, and then like, and at some point I woke up like a year ago and I was like, holy shit, I have 15 people working for me. Like, I'm not a leader, like, And I think it was like, I don't know, for some reason I felt like I needed to like do things and become things, and like that I needed some like, I don't know what I thought I needed to like be a leader. And then I was like, oh, actually like what I'm doing every day is working, and like I am one. And I think that just that mind shift like changed a lot for me.
It's amazing when that clicks too. Yeah. I think you're
Am I the last one? Okay. I think the thing that I've learned is just the hard is good. Like, hard is not bad. Sometimes we think hard is bad, but actually, for me, I've learned that when I do the hard things, it's actually really lovely. And I see a part of myself that I never got to uncover if I didn't do it. So it's been kind of fun to learn.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah, hard is hard. Hard does not need to be bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, follow-up, okay, there's money in the follow-up. That is something that I also learned. Sometimes people don't like despise you or ignoring you. Sometimes they're just busy with life, and we're all going through this simultaneously. So sometimes you need to remind them about the invoice, the check, the net 30, and all the things, and the money will still come.
Yes, that's an excellent point too.
Yeah.
All right, we've got about
Always get paid.
10 minutes
Always
left.
get paid.
Does anybody have any questions from the audience? Yes.
Q&A session. I'm going to ask anybody that has a question to come up here.
Yay!
Now everyone's like, never mind, I don't have questions.
Monique, I'm going to ask you the next one. Thank you. We'll just, yes, please. We're recording the session, so unless it's
Oh, perfect. So don't mess it up. Hi. I'm a female founder, so thank you guys for your moments of vulnerability today. It's been very relatable. I love it. I'm a financial advisor. I own my own practice. When you guys started, what are pieces of financial advice, money advice you wish you had? Because over 50% of my clients are also female founders.
So because I was in ops, the very first person I hired was an accountant. Because I knew enough to be dangerous. I got my QuickBooks Online set up. I knew I didn't want to deal with the IRS or anything like that. But the one thing I probably would have done sooner that my accountant did was switch me over to an S Corp. So that way I actually started taking a salary because, like I said, always get paid. I do not work for free. No one should work for free, but I personally do not work for free. So with my accountant, before I got anything set up, he switched that over so that way I always, when I was budgeting, planning, I had a salary so that I could see for future scaling what it would look like to pay others.
Yeah, I think for me, I also hired an accountant very quickly. And that was in part like my own naivete. Like I didn't even know where to begin. And for me, this relates to just like getting up and running and starting, in my case, an LLC, like having a toolkit that says, here are the 10 things to do. I mean, I must have scoured every small business, Missouri State, like everything. And it is so abundantly unclear as to how you start, which steps you take, in what order. And I am speaking from a place of privilege. Like I had time and flexibility, and it was still so incredibly challenging. And then the other thing I think is just really helpful advice and tips would be like how much to keep in reserves. Like as you are building, especially for a team of 1 or 2, like a very small team, like what should you be building toward? Yeah.
Plus one to that, I think we found an excellent accountant very early on, which was game changing. She's now like a fractional CFO, and I think has helped. There was just like, we went through 1 billion accelerators, and like no one tells you basic things about like how to use QuickBooks. And something that I think, and this might be a nonprofit specific thing, but I think it also is just like a women specific thing, is that like you can invest the balance of your like business bank account holdings, which we got to a point where we had over $1 million in the bank, and our accountant was like, wait, why aren't you investing this money? And I was like, oh, well, it's just like the business money that we have in this, like, she's like, if you had that much money in your personal account, you would invest it. Like, and I didn't know. I had no idea that was a thing that organizations or businesses did. And I think it's like sort of reflective of, I think, the way women think about investing in general is like that, if you have the assets to do it, you should be like thinking about how you compound those assets.
Go ahead. Oh, yeah. I'm going to be honest and say I just learned a whole lot right here. Because to your point, when you talk about speaking from a place of privilege, when you don't have that privilege, right, on the opposite side, for me personally, it was like, do the work, do the work, do the work, do the work. And I still need to know how the hell to itemize stuff on the spreadsheet. I'm still using Excel, so QuickBooks, I'm like, ah.
That was a game changer for me, opening up QuickBooks.
Okay, well, there we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I feel like she took my question, but I'm going to word it. So first of all, thank you so much. I am so excited that you guys said that the accountant was the first thing that you hired, because I own an accounting firm, and I was just like, I don't hear that often, so kudos to you all. But my question is, I know you guys, seems like a lot of you guys are kind of still in your infancy of your business, couple of years. When did you decide that the tipping point was to hire outsource stuff, whether it be accounting or marketing or someone to write your copy? When did you decide to say, okay, I can't wear all the hats, I just need to just wear this one core hat?
When I realized that I was slowing down the progress with my clients. So if I'm taking so much time, and to be clear, we're all smart women up here. We could probably learn how to do a lot of these things. We could learn QuickBooks, we could learn Canva. We could probably chat GPT how to formulate some kind of copy, things like that. However, what is the best use of your time? And I realized I was going down the admin rabbit hole, and I'm like, oh, dag, I still have to analyze this data and do this presentation. I'm stifling the growth with my client and with myself. So that's what I'm currently wrapping my head around. Understanding my lane of genius and who else can do the rest. Yeah.
I would say, since you are an accountant, think about your hourly rate. And would you pay someone else to do that at the rate you're charging yourself? And if you're okay with that number, then sure, you could do it. Or if you're like, I could outsource it, hire part-time, or could an intern, so automate, delegate, or get rid of it. Think about what that's going to actually cost you, and is that the best and highest use of your time? And that's how I ran numbers. And then for me, I just got really busy, and it was, do I have time to recruit, or can I trust my spouse to jump in? I'm happy to say we're still together. We share an office. Ebbi knows him, Claire sees him, but yeah. So it's also when you're ready to find that person, can you trust them with the income you're gonna be able to shell out from your company?
I would say we hired pretty quickly. At least my number 2, but I took a long time figuring out who that person was going to be. So being very strategic about who your number 2 or number 3 is going to be is really, really important. But we looked at it as like an investment in our business, because if we didn't do it, then we wouldn't grow. So, yeah.
I think one of the lessons I've had to learn the hard way is that at some point, if you're running an organization, your job becomes recruiting, and your job becomes finding people that can do the thing better than you. I'm not embarrassed to admit, but I run a multi-million-dollar 17-person organization, and until September 15th, I was doing 90% of our grant writing myself. In part because I was good at it, right? I had a very high hit rate. I'm a good writer, and that was something I'm also very comfortable doing. And I would have people come in, and I was they're not as good as I could do myself. So it just was never quite. And then at some point, someone that works for me pointed out that actually, all the other things that you feel like are important are not as important as you spending the next 3 weeks finding somebody that can do this as to your bar. And we found an excellent contracted grant writer, and I do invest a lot of time in it. And I think it was a huge mindset shift for me to be actually my job is to find somebody that can do this that will then free me up. And I think that's really hard, because I think part of the reason people are successful in starting organizations and getting anything up and running is because you are good at things, and you're a very good operator and individual contributor, and learning how to become essentially a recruiter. And also just the job of managing people is very different than the job of doing. And sometimes that takes coaching to get good at that, and knowing. That's been another big thing for me, is knowing the point at which you actually need somebody to help you do that.
All right, thank you all. I appreciate everything that you all have shared today. And my question is, I know that each of you is better today than you were 6 months ago. And in 6 months, you'll be better than you are today. So my question is, time travel 12 months from now, okay? What are the top 2 things that is currently on your roadmap that you're excited to bring to fruition?
So one of the goals I had set out for, and this is something I've never done before but always wanted to, was to teach. My background is in hospitality and event planning, and I'm a lawyer by trade. So no, there's no teaching in there. I'm an only child. I have no younger siblings. I didn't babysit. So teaching is not something that was innate in who I am, but I've been drawn to it. And starting in January, I will be doing adjunct work with UMSL. And so I'm hoping from that moment I can expand upon that, because one of the things I have seen with my work with clients is that project management and problem solving isn't something necessarily being taught in the way that I was taught and the way we were taught growing up. And so some of the younger staff, while they're good at their roles, if you aren't spelling out precisely everything that needs to be done, there's lots of steps that are missing. And so I'm spending a lot of time training people on stuff that I learned as an intern, or I learned because I worked in the mall, because there's just certain jobs and things that aren't available anymore. So I'm really excited to be going on this path, because eventually I would like to be able to train our next generation on problem solving, on operations, because the work I do, you are welcome. The work I do isn't going away. We will always have teams, we will always have structure, and people will always be people. So we have to be able to learn to help them and actually train this next set of staff and leaders.
Yeah.
Mine actually relates to the last question, which is, I think, a big goalpost for me in 2025 will be identifying like who that next person is and in what capacity. So there's a lot of discernment to getting to the point of like which pieces need to stay mine and which pieces can I spread. And then I also love to write, and I've been thinking a lot about how I can push myself to be more present in some capacity, like HBR or somewhere, and get a piece out there in the world.
Are we going down? Okay, cool. Something that I'm actively working on is my tour for next year. It's called Lead From Where You Stand. Working with universities. So those of you that are decision makers at your universities, DE&I, women's departments, whatever, business, career services. I started my first business when I was in college. So 3 months ago, I woke up and I said, this could be really useful information on the college level on how to advocate for yourself, how to maneuver around the university setting, how to get money when the people you thought were supposed to give it to you did not. And so the Lead From Where You Stand tour is basically a training that can be modified in lots of different ways, but where I'm teaching these emerging leaders how to advocate for themselves, take their idea and bring it to the world in real time. So that's the tour. All of my university adjacent folks, let's talk. But there's that. And then actually tomorrow I start the contract for the largest contract that I've had in my career. Thank you. And in 12 months it will be over. So in 12 months I would like to start doing fractional CMO services. So Chief Marketing Officer Services. Yes. Yeah. Yep.
I think in like a work world, we're at a point now where we have, between now and the end of the year, are closing contracts with like large state systems, and we'll be starting to do work where we're like, we have a state where we're trying to get our tools in the hands of every incarcerated person in that state, and like the idea that there's a chance it might take 18 months, but looking out over the next year, it's really like cool and exciting to be in a position where you can have influence at that level. I think at a personal level, I work in a field that involves a lot of trauma, involves a lot of things, and a big part of my own journey has been like body work and yoga and like building a tool set for myself to figure out like how I can be well and do this type of work. So I'm a queer woman who also had really bad scoliosis as a kid. And so I started a side business called Not Straight Yoga. That I think is just a great fun. And I've started teaching a little bit on the side, and I'm excited I'm gonna do that more in a slightly more formalized capacity next year, and so I'm excited about that.
Just real quick, +1 Monique, training the next, because we've been around for 7 years and we're finding turnover happens. So finding people to take those spots. Yep. Thanks. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen as well. Honestly, all of you have been so inspiring. My question is a little off from business, but it's a question that I've been thinking, especially after the election. During these unprecedented times, how can we fully acknowledge the interrelatedness and interconnectedness of all things? How can we contribute to creating a more inclusive, sustainable, and equitable society and have a desire to truly make a difference on the people and the planet and the community that we live in?
I will answer this as quickly as I can. So one, I appreciate your question. Two, I love your sweater. It's a very cute outfit, a really good front row look. So for me, after everything, and I was coming back from vacation, so I went into the election with just a sense of like rejuvenation, excitement. This is the world I live in. This is the skin I have. I'm gonna wake up the exact same person I was the day before and the day after, and I will continue to be this person every day for the next 4 to hopefully 90 years. And because of that, I also work with people, so I will be honest, I wasn't surprised. People are gonna people are gonna be themselves. I also understand that like there are people who truly thought that was the best option for them. I can't change how people behave. or think. What I can do is continue to show up the way I have been and continue to do the work that I've always done. I'm not going to change anything about who I am, who I work with, and who I serve. And I will still show up. I will still advocate for the right folks. I will still support the right folks, all the folks. I will still say good morning to every person I see in my building, regardless of who they voted for. So more of your question about how to become inclusive, I've always been this person I just lead on the side of being happy. Like, I love to have a good time. I'm a retired party girl. Like, these are all things about me that have remained true. And regardless of how you feel, I am retired. Regardless of how you feel, like, my energy is what I can give to the world. And my willingness to see you for who you are and accept you for who you are, regardless if you see me the same way, is on you. I love everyone. I want everyone to be happy. I want everyone to be fulfilled. And that looks different for everyone. So all I can do is continue to be myself and speak up when necessary. And I will say I do have a little bit more of a fight energy in me. So like sometimes I might let some things slide. I'd say moving forward, I'm not letting anything slide. So that's probably the biggest change, is that things aren't going to slide anymore, at least if you're with me or with people I know.
Yeah, your question for me is such a big reason for the work that I do in the world and in institutions. I feel like the institutions that we all go spend so much of our lives in every day ought to be places where more people can thrive. And so it is so wrapped up in why I do what I do every day, and a couple of like mantras that I have been holding on to. One is from Ford through Ferguson. I'm a board member for the organization, and if you look back at the commission report, they talk about having a culture of trying, and so often we are so bad at that culturally, being willing to try when we don't know what the outcome will be, or when we think it might not be perfect or already figured out. And so I try to show up every day and keep trying and making those incremental changes. And then I think we have to like hold that vision and practice each day toward that vision. Like, we have to just choose to be in a practice that will close the gap.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something I've been reflecting on a lot. And like, I woke up Wednesday morning and have a team of people and was thinking about like, okay, how do I address this team of people? Like, what do I say? How do you and started putting some thoughts to paper. And the thing that really came to mind was, so my partner's a Buddhist and has a lot of like mantras. And one of the things she was talking about was that like in any moment, you can choose to increase happiness or you can choose to increase suffering. And that's like the only choice that we as people have. And I think as I was like talking to my team, and as I was thinking about that, that really like resonated, where I was like, the thing that has gotten me out of bed every morning for the last 8 years through 2 different presidential administrations, a million different political changes, has been like, can I do something today to like make somebody happier? And can I like somehow make the world incrementally better in my scope of control today? And I don't know, I think that like helps give me hope and give me a frame of reference for what it feels like I can do in this moment.
I think for me, it's very specific to owning my truth, because in owning my truth in all of my intersectionalness, right, I create opportunities, events, platforms, trainings that center authenticity, that center humanness, that center elevating your voice and really being heard and taking up space. And so me as my one person self, I'm going to keep providing that access. I think now, I've always had a fight spirit, and now at this point, it's kind of like knuck if you buck spirit, but that part. But where I am with it now is I'm constantly challenging my clients to really tap into what makes them unique, because unique, but also same, so that we can understand how to bridge a lot of these gaps that can open those doors to inclusivity. A lot of the times we're lonely and we feel like we're alone because we feel like we're the only one living through this particular experience. And so sometimes, all the time, sharing stories out loud is what bridges those gaps. So I'm moving forward with that same energy, just a little bit more knuck if you buck. Yeah.
Jen, I loved your question. You talked about interconnectedness and just the fact that we are kind of all in it together now, even if it's like a new reality. We are all the same people that we were here yesterday, and now we're in a different relationship. So, I mean, I think about our work as, I mentioned I'm a system dynamicist. Same system can create completely different outcomes if you just tweak it. And I think what I've learned is that there were some connections missing between people that may have helped in the long run if we had been better about listening to each other or trying to find ways to bridge. And I think my initial reaction was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna hole up and like, I don't know, blankets over my head, like whatever, I don't wanna talk to anyone anymore. But I think what I've learned is that that's probably the wrong response, and like, I need to show up, I need to listen, we need to do that kind of radical listening that we talk about in our space with others. So I want to push more on that in all the work that we do. So thanks for that question.
Jen, what's your answer to that question?
I +1 to everything, but honestly, yeah, the showing up and the kindness, you know, like that it's split between not give you buck and also like take care of each other, you know, just like know the people who don't want you to take care of them and, you know, hopefully choose to walk away, but also just like finding small ways to bring joy. I keep telling my team at work, joy is an act of resistance right now, and it's really important. That's from an amazing poem. Look it up if you don't know it. I did not write it. But I keep thinking that, so, you know, and unfortunately I also was not surprised because 2016 did surprise me, and I was like, let's be a little more realistic so I can get out of bed in less than 4 hours, you know? And also my son needs pancakes, but yeah, just like continuing, like he asked me the next day, like, what do we do? And I said, we're gonna do the same thing we would have done no matter what. We're gonna take care of our community, we're gonna lift up the people who need our help more, especially coming from a place of privilege, and we're gonna be as kind as we can to humans, even if they're not kind to us, which I have my good days and bad days with that, but you know, we try. Culture of trying. We try every day. None of us are perfect, but we are authentic, and I thank you so much for being your authentic selves here with us, taking this time on a Tuesday after a rough week and a rough day for some of us, and I just really appreciate STL Startup Week for having us and all of you for being here. Thank you so much.